It's your choice. Josh, take it away, my friend.
Thanks, Mike. It's great to see everybody here. My name is Joshua Steinman. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Galvanic. We're here to talk about the industrial base we need. So we're going to go quickly down the line, brief intros, and then we'll kick it off. We're going to be here briefly because alcohol awaits. So stay in your seats. Folks that are standing up, grab seats if you want. Chris?
Chris Shank from Sierra Nevada company, not the beer company. We're aerospace defense contractor. You're probably heard of us from, we recently won the Doomsday plane, which got featured in the Washington Post in an article late last night. We're doubling the size of our company over the next few years, and that's where Fadi and Aaron Osman asked me to join here after I flushed out of Maxar Technologies just last fall. But I'd worked with them for many years, and they're a great family business.
Liz Reynolds, nice to be here. I'm a professor of the practice at MIT. I ran a research center at MIT for about a decade on industrial innovation ecosystems. Also co-led MIT's task force on the work of the future, and then spent 2021, 2022 in the Biden administration at the National Economic Council as the special assistant to the president for manufacturing and economic development.
Hi, everyone. I'm Drew Oetting, one of the founders and president of APC, which is both an early stage investing business where we manage about $6 billion, and also we co-found and start from scratch 2 to 3 companies a year across supply chain, healthcare, biotech, defense, and other industries like that.
So we're all here. We're all interested and passionate about reindustrializing America, but we're all here because it's actually not happening. So what we're going to talk about today is why not and what can be done with it. So Drew, I'm actually going to kick it off by asking you one specific question. So 8 has incubated and grown several companies across defense, biotech, et cetera. And are there lessons learned that you found where you've seen there are friction points with repatriation of the manufacturing supply chain?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's every single company we have that is building an end product, which requires that it needs to be in the United States, which always has been defense, but now is many other things, biomanufacturing, biotech, which is sort of really come into light. I think the biggest challenge, and it really came out to me, was I was in Taiwan, and I was at Taiwan Semiconductor watching the way that they did things, and it's really like I think the labor, and the ancillary services around it, I think are the part that I think most early stage companies don't fully grasp how complicated and important it can be. In Taiwan Semiconductor, there are people with PhDs in chemistry that are operating machinery, or the janitorial service companies there have experts in semiconductor clean rooms, and I think we don't have that infrastructure here yet. Got it.
And Elisabeth, do you want to talk about maybe dovetailing on what Drew was talking about? Are there labor policies that you were looking at in the White House, or other things that you think might facilitate repatriation of the supply chain?
So first of all, I think I might take issue with the idea that nothing's happened or nothing's happening. I really think that we've had a sort of awakening, which is the reflection of this conference, in the last decade for a whole host of reasons. One is geopolitical, obviously, and we've heard about that. We've figured out there's a China playbook, and we've been played, and we need to correct on that. We've understood supply chain vulnerability, whether it's PPE, semiconductors, critical minerals, vaccines, a whole host of things that this country has been, subjected to, and understand national and economic security are problematic. And then we have climate and the existential crisis of climate and what steps we have to take. So, needless to say, we had some bipartisan support for major pieces of legislation, in specifically the CHIPS Act. We've also had the IRA, and those have now led to about $500 billion in private sector investment in manufacturing capabilities or facilities in the country. So it's a start, but it's a stake in the ground that says we have to change the trajectory we've been on, which we heard about all day, that started in the 70s. And I think we have got a kind of bipartisan support, a collective understanding that this is, we're at the beginning of something. So there's a lot more to do. I can, pile on to what Miles had to say. But at the very least, we've got new investment. We've got new institutions at the federal level. Office of Strategic Capital at DOD is an acknowledgement of the capital challenges. The Manufacturing and Energy Supply Chain Office at DOE. We've got, now we have a Department of Energy and a Department of Commerce who actually are invested in rebuilding manufacturing. It's not just a DOD story at this point. So, so stake in the ground and, some path forward, and I think we're, this is the beginning for me. I think we've got a lot more to do.
And I think Miles did a good job setting that up, that we didn't get into this problem overnight, and we're not going to get out of this problem overnight. We are, was it Niall Ferguson recently had said we're in the second Cold War with a bunch of proxy wars, hot wars going on that Iran is sponsoring, and then they are working together with the Russians and the Chinese, et cetera. So that when you look at the way things, the axis of evil has been set against Western democracies, that is a rallying call for our country to pay attention, for the government to pay attention, and to start being a smart buyer when it comes to this. I've spent 26 years in government. It is damn hard to find a champion for doing the right thing sometimes, as opposed to the status quo.
Right, but Chris, the defense contractors, the industrial base still has commercial pressures driving, procurement from tier ones, tier twos, from places that are not the United States. So, what are some of the friction points that you've seen in the private sector where, there isn't that equal forcing function? So when I was at the White House leading supply chain efforts inside the NSC, we certainly would talk to people and they would say, well, we don't want to repatriate X, Y, and Z, or our subcontractors or sub-subcontractors don't want to, because if we do it, we're essentially at, we're at a disadvantage from our competitors. So are there places inside private sector, inside big defense companies like Sierra Nevada, where you think there is a role for government to step in and start really mandating things deeply within that defense supply chain that would actually drive a bunch of this stuff to repatriate?
Yeah, the nature of nuclear command and control by itself, as well as the artificial intelligence algorithms in order to feed intelligence analysis. I'm going to take it from my Maxar time in particular. This was commercial satellite imagery being sold to the U.S. government, as well as allied governments, Taiwan, Australia, Japan, et cetera. And they had very often better access to our commercial capabilities than our own U.S. government did. And we pointed that out. I mean, I spent 26 years in government. I fondly recall one of those during my strategic capabilities office days. My job was to break China, whether it's within the government as well within the U.S. government as well as outside. But that was the role that we had that we were playing. And everybody needs to be focused on that mission. Some comments before about the focus and the technology development during the Apollo program. Apollo program was genius because it was man, moon, decade. Very simple. And this is the kind of threat environment that we need to understand as a country. And when you look at that, you pointed out earlier some World Trade Organization kind of things. The thought piece leadership at that time in the late 90s was the Lexus and the olive tree, right? And that was this is going to be the nirvana, for this. Well, it was pretty good for a generation, and now this next generation that follows behind it has nothing to work from in terms of an industrial base. So it's going to take a while to get out of that from 20 some years ago.
Drew, you guys helped spin up Resilience Bio, obviously biomanufacturing, vaccines, et cetera, big business, top of mind for everyone these past few years. Do you want to talk about some of the pressures that industry has with regards to precursors, et cetera, where, again, we may be doing finished manufacturing here in the United States, but still massive amounts of the raw materials come from abroad?
Yeah, I mean, I think that when we started Resilience, it was early 2020. We co-founded with Bob Nelson at Arch. And it was really because of a conversation of between national security, supply chain, and biotech. And manufacturing has always been kind of a pain for biotech companies, especially novel, therapeutics that maybe have very small scale initially, and a lot of the decision making in manufacturing starts, preclinically before you have any real requirement of scale, and then you're not going to change it if you have a successful clinical program. You're just going to charge more or make slightly less margin. And so we always view manufacturing as kind of a key bottleneck on lowering costs, but also increasing the efficacy and speed of these types of new, like genomic medicines. And so we started this business Resilience to build a US-based CDMO. It's now, I think, the largest with Catalent's purchase, so it's not saying much, I guess, being the largest, but well over $500 million of revenue. And we started it a few acquisitions because we couldn't build greenfield fast enough, and it was very expensive. And frankly, what we did is we swapped a lot of risks. You get to speed fast, you can serve customers, but you also have a hodgepodge of facilities on your network. And so right from the beginning, we saw that this was being targeted from our foreign adversaries. We had to debug facilities. There were foreign nationals that left, and obviously the inputs to commercial manufacturing, some of them are made in the United States. I mean, actually, two of the most important companies that are now owned by Danaher are Aldevron and IDT. Aldevron's in Fargo, and IDT's in my hometown of Iowa City, Iowa, or Coralville, Iowa. But there is a lot of potential vulnerability on the input side, both in biotech, but also in healthcare broadly. I think the good news is that in biotech, the innovation all happens here, and the customers are all here. And so we actually do develop the manufacturing processes, and then they've been, largely, as they become sort of standard, they get pushed overseas. I think what you're seeing now is that they're staying here, and I feel like there's also a lot of infrastructure in Western Europe for the inputs, and so, but you see a massive amount of every single pharma company is trying to move, off of a China-linked supply chain right now.
If I could just add to that, I think that in the bio space, like we do own the innovation, we're just driving the innovation, but there is this bottleneck on the manufacturing. And it's not that we just need to linearly expand capacity, right? We need to figure out how we do it differently, right? It's the manufacturing processes, and that's again where the competitive advantage is for the U.S. And just to note, like, what is, one of the challenges is the cost of the pilot production, et cetera. So, one of the responses right now is DOD is putting $1 billion towards bioindustrial pilot facilities. It may not be the full answer, but it's trying to find a way for our innovators to actually start to scale, because we don't have necessarily private sector investment to pull that. So I think there's a lot of innovation in the models of how we do this that are happening.
Are there elements of trade policy that you think might facilitate an accelerated schedule for some of these companies to repatriate some of those elements deep within their supply chains?
So, again, the term repatriate for me, or reshore, it's not clear to me. We're moving something that's already in China back. I feel like we're reinventing how we do it. That's what we're going to do. Now, that is not the case for everything. I know we've got issues for our quantum supply chain and other things, but I think that's the vision. I think on the trade place, obviously we're using tariffs in an aggressive way and in a very focused way around particular pieces. Whether we go down that road of the carrot or whether we have the stick, which says here are incentives to be building and investing in the country, I think it depends on the product. And obviously we're watching certain tariffs to be, we're really leaning in on some of these.
So Chris, Sierra Nevada, obviously on the side of carrot and stick, you've got, massive investments into sometimes boutique, sometimes commodity defense technologies that get used by the warfighter and strategic decision makers every day. Are there things that you guys pay attention to, semiconductors, et cetera, that you think offer levers to, again, press for that, either maybe rebuilding of capacity? We could articulate it however we want, inside the defense industry?
Yeah, especially, so where we're at today, Sierra Nevada is a tier 2, on that compared to the larger primes, who often will hold their data, their property rights, on something, on a particular design. And so we have been doing a lot of investments in digital engineering, to replicate those capability. Very often the digital engineer is better than the original design schematics from, that when it came out of the factory in terms of the aircraft that we're dealing with here. And we can make changes then. That open architecture that we then create is our ability then to, host other advanced sensors, that kind of thing. And then the artificial intelligence for the amount of data coming in from a variety of ISR sensors, that has been a game changing, and that has been advanced really in the last, I would say 5 years, for that. I was at Maxar at the time at the beginning of the Ukraine war, and because our software developers were working on, before things were generated out to the ops floor, our software developers actually saw the invasion happening in February of 22 before the ops floor did for the U.S. government. We're the ones who alerted them because of our AI algorithms. We're firing all like, hey, they're coming in now, and that's been game changing, the whole Maven. So those two areas, I think, and we've been entering some work in some additive manufacturing. To Miles' point earlier, which is to reduce the amount of waste that goes on in the factory for a number of unique applications.
But as you all are going out and equipping that new doomsday plane with new electronic systems, maybe revising the avionics systems, however you go about doing it, to what extent are you having to go out and interact with the marketplace, which may have to, go procure something that is lowest cost? And so do you see that reflected in the business practices that you guys engage in? Or do you think that that's, systemic to the defense? I wouldn't want you to talk about Sierra specifically, but do you think that's systemic to the defense industrial base? And do you think there are opportunities for us to go out and start mandating that, deep inside those supply chains, that we need to actually have mandates that stuff be, American made? Or
well, there are certain mandates because of there is concerns about changes in software that it could have occurred, et cetera, that are deeply embedded, that I probably should not discuss openly in this kind of setting. But that's real world. What it really comes down to is understanding the DoD customer. I think I saw a statistic that Sierra Nevada is roughly 30% veterans. That is the deep understanding that you need to have for special ops, folks, et cetera, people that are putting themselves in harm's way, and how they would be using a new capability.
Right, but
but also too, that goes to whether it's a nuclear command and control pilot as well. They need to know that. They need to know their mission and that they have trust in what's going on. And the question of trust has been an ongoing issue with a lot of AI answers.
Right, but several months ago, a senior executive from one of the major defense primes got up in front of Congress and essentially said we can't build the we can't build the defense apparatus that we have without semiconductors and other things from China. So I'm asking you as an executive.
You're particular to semiconductors, yeah.
Well, semiconductors.
So you have to have custody, throughout that supply chain. I think that's more to your point. I'm not the supply chain guy for Sierra Nevada on that. Yeah. So in terms of my depth on that, you're getting to that limit.
Got it. Sorry. So Drew, we'll go back to you. Some other great investments that AIT has made over the past few years. You've got Saronic and Chaos. These are startups that are building soon to be scaling platforms for the Department of Defense. Do you want to talk about some of the experiences that your founders have had interacting with the United States government, interacting with that type of sole customer process, and maybe some opportunities that might exist to make that faster or better?
Well, I feel woefully, I guess, I'm so amateurish compared to Chris, but I can tell what our view is that. We think we've been investing in defense technology. It goes back to my business partner is one of the founders of Palantir. And so we've been, and I think a lot of the talent that now is in defense technology companies. Some of it originates from Palantir, and I think that's because there's a lot of hard lessons learned. There's a lot of, around how you actually go build technology that the U.S., the DoD and other parts of the government will rely on. I think that our sense is that there's a lot of encouragement for early stage technology companies, and that's great. I think our bar is incredibly high for investing in those companies. The type of people that they need and the type of unfair advantage they need to build, and then the type of technological improvement or innovation needs to be really high in order to warrant what is a relatively arduous sales cycle and capital requirement. As it relates to industrialization, I think as there's more of these businesses started, and I think there will be, and I think it's really good for the country, the question is, they're also going to have to learn how to build scalable supply chains and manufacturing, which is maybe just as difficult, but it isn't perceived to be just as difficult. And so when you think of a company like Saronic that maybe is 60,000 square feet of manufacturing space now, they can kind of figure that out as they move to 500,000 square feet or 1 million square feet. Where do you find that facility? I'm imagining a lot of people here in El Segundo or
Limited
based,
space,
right? Where are you going to go get 1 million square feet? Like, you should start thinking about that. It's probably not going to be there. That's what you're going to need if you're a successful company. I mean, how many square feet of manufacturing space do you think Anduril has, if that's what you want to become? Let alone what Sierra Nevada probably has in terms of manufacturing. So the problem is that as a VC, I have no advice for you other than like telling you, hey, I actually don't know anything about this. We have been doing this for a long time, and I know basically just that I don't know anything, really. And so I can bring you advisors and other people, but I think this is like what the big opportunity is I think it's a big opportunity in defense specifically for some of the larger companies to partner and in a way that's mutually beneficial. But I also think it's really big opportunity for places in the United States where there is manufacturing expertise, because there are places that have that, and getting that advice and expertise brought in, because it is what every single company that's raising. We had 2 defense companies raise over $100 million in the last month. That's all for manufacturing. That's what they're raising for.
Drew, have you guys seen talent move sort of from like the Series D, Series E startups down? So are you seeing us build that sort of ecosystem of skill?
I think for sure. I'm still not certain that it's, as it relates to the manufacturing and supply chain part. I think there's experience on the commercial side which really translates. I mean, many, what founders of Anduril were, 3 out of the 4 came from Palantir. They understood how the commercial side worked. And Paul Merlecki happens to be a person that's highly unique in terms of the way he can figure things out. But I do think a lot of companies, I see our companies making the same mistakes, and I think they'd be much more efficient and move faster if they had partnership with folks who really had built these manufacturing infrastructure.
Can I ask Drew a question?
Yeah, sure.
I worked on Capitol Hill when Elon was just starting SpaceX. Yeah. He was a startup, right? He had money coming out. He had about $350 that he was going to put into SpaceX. And he came to me on Capitol Hill. He goes, I can't get my phone calls returned, from NASA at the time. And I was just shocked by that. So I made sure that I helped foster that. I'm like, look, this is going to happen. And I was like, what's your problem, NASA? And then I came into NASA. Then we worked, his first contract. Do you have that problem? Getting your phone calls returned, or your companies?
I think that's improved. But I think the sophistication has also ramped up. I think that venture capital now, it's much larger in asset class. There's much more integration between venture capitalists and the government.
Yeah.
It used to be like, even 10 years ago, very few venture capitalists were even like visiting DC or donating to politicians. That has changed. Yeah. So I think it's better. There's also been a lot of, like one of the cheat codes that most people know is like, there's a lot of, you want to build one of these companies, make sure you have like some special operators that are like, have left and are now like in business development for you, because they can get their phone calls answered. So part of it is about having the right people who actually have credibility. But I think that is one area that has improved, and I think that, frankly, Elon, SpaceX has done a lot to.
Elizabeth,
Yeah, I might weigh in. I mean, like, it's great that phone calls are getting returned and that Elon got his call returned. I don't think that's how we should set up our national strategy for scaling manufacturing.
That's what was shocking about it.
You're right. I mean, we need to be more systematic about this. And what we recognize is, in fact, that I think that venture isn't going to solve this problem. And we've got a lot of different ways in which the sort of finding that where the private sector is willing to start, what the government can do to help de-risk technology or provide some of the demand signals or the pull with advanced market commitments. But, there's a number of tools that folks are using now that are helping on this process. So the tax credits of the IRA, right, are bringing a lot of helping with facilities building. We've got loans, the DOE and the loan program, EXIM is getting in the game. We've got these grants that are going on. We've got the Office of Strategic Capital. We'll see what defense can do. I think the good news is a recognition of the problem. And I think that what we need is the innovation on the public and private side as to how we address that growth capital issue. And
right. So I'm gonna come right back to you with our last question of the panel. So Elisabeth, if you could wave a magic wand and do one thing to make that process better, what would it be? And I'm then going to ask.
On scale up capital specifically?
Yeah, or as broad as you want to go with regards to those four things that you articulated that were happening better now. So we could either talk scale up capital or purchasing.
Well, I'm just gonna sneak in too. I can't help it. So I think one side is we've got to figure out how to digitalize and bring the software that's human-centric, I'm looking at Natan Linder, to our small and medium-sized firms, to the supply chains. And then I feel like we've got to figure out what's the public-private model that's gonna bring in the growth capital for scale-up. So what is the minimal thing that the federal government can do that will really help unleash the growth capital for all the companies here that we know we need to scale.
Great. Chris, magic wand, what one thing are you going to do to try and give us the industrial base we need?
So where I was going with that question about about phone calls not getting returned, you provided some very good systematic aspirational, these are the good carrots. There's other tools that are available. Elon had to do a GAO protest on a source selection and they said, look, this is we're further along with our Dragon capsule than the other team was, et cetera, and that we were unfairly based. So use that tool that's available, the GAO protest. In the case with the Air Force, I think it was in the 2012, 2013 timeframe, he then did a lawsuit. So you've got to pick your battles and use those perhaps negative tools, sticks, when needed, especially if you got to fight for what you believe in, on some of these things. So that's where I'd go with that.
Drew, magic wand. What are you doing?
I'll give a private and public sector. So on the public side, I think the biggest thing is I actually, I don't know if we disagree, but I believe the private sector will solve most of these problems eventually. The problem is the speed, right? And especially as you think about the national security implications of things, we don't have time to be libertarians on it, even though in theory, I am. And I think the cleanest way to do this is through lowering the cost of capital for scale, but people should be on the hook for it. So I think with resilience, we have a great partnership with DFC, where we have we basically have a loan with the government that has a fixed rate, 20 years, so we can really model that cost of capital. That helps a lot when you want a U.S. CDMO to get to scale quickly, because each one of these facilities costs hundreds of millions of dollars, right? So I think but it's debt. It has real strings attached. It's not funny money, and I think that's probably the best solution for that would help the private sector really accelerate returns, especially as it relates to building out manufacturing facilities, which are very expensive and don't really fit on the balance sheet of a startup in a normal way. I think that's what the public sector could do. On the private sector, I think it's actually the opposite. We need to we need to show that we have tons of respect, and we really need to raise up the jobs that are in these manufacturing facilities. For too long, the United States has basically said everyone needs to be a knowledge worker, and it doesn't matter whether you don't actually make any money after you go to college and get this, really expensive degree. There's hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of unfilled jobs in the United States that are six-figure jobs and have paths to, either building your own small business or a really strong career that are vocational. And the idea that even in some of our facilities, we have to fight this idea, oh, someone needs a college degree. Why do they need a college degree to operate this, to do this? It has nothing to do with, you don't sit around in, poli-sci class and learn how to operate a, giant bioreactor. It's ridiculous. And we need the physical infrastructure, we also need the human capital. And we need people to see these jobs as jobs that they are going to, that can both provide for their family, but also provide them, respect. And I think it's a really important thing for all of us that we can all do. Elisabeth, you had
So couldn't agree with you more. And I do think there's been a mind shift actually in the country, and you can see they're really focusing on, competencies, not degrees, which is awesome. And I'm just going to close with a plug for tomorrow's session, in which we'll talk about this and other things with the SCSP folks on a national strategy for advanced manufacturing. I think it's at 1 or 1:30, but anyway, we can follow up on that topic.
All right, and with that, I promised Mike we'd be brief. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for coming. Happy hour coming soon.
Thank you, Josh.